Welcome to video 3 of Miss McKean's Tips and Tricks for Finals. Just as a quick review, I have broken down effective finals studying into 3 major steps. So video 1 was how to organize your studying. Video 2 was how to know what to study to be efficient, since there is just simply not enough time to restudy everything. And now that we've taken those steps, we're into video 3, how to actually study that material you figured out that you need to study. So if you need to go back to video 1, that was about how to know the schedule for finals and how to know the tests that you are going to be taking. Video 2, you might need to go back to determine what to study. I went through a process of knowing what you know and don't know, knowing the big picture, and knowing what you've been assessed on already. If you have taken those first 2 steps, now what we're going to do is go through how to study. I'm going to go through my favorite way to study, which is tricks to make it stick, knowing the step-by-step, and knowing what's helpful to you. So, welcome to video 3 of how to study. So, a lot of the times you have so much content to memorize just from the few classes that I teach. When I taught Honors World Geography, when I teach IB History, there's a lot of content for that one class, but you have more than one class. So how are you going to remember this content? I like to make things stick. And so what that means is a fun way to remember content or skills, that it sticks in your brain. This could be an acronym, a word play, a jingle, a symbol, a simile, or something else. There have been times in IB History where I have my students make Instagram stories, write tweets from the perspective of the historical leaders that we're studying, to turn it into something that sticks with them, with language that matters more to them, and so it sticks in their brain. I've also compared different situations in foreign policy to situations that happen in the TV show The Office. Therefore, it sticks a little bit better in your brain and you remember it. Now, I do want to preface this with, make it stick doesn't work for some students. So a majority of students are going to need help memorizing, and this works for them. I would say probably 90-95% of students. But that 5 to 10% of students who are just good at memorizing, this is just an extra step that is a nuisance and annoying. So if this isn't for you, it's not for you, and that's totally okay. But it never hurts to try something, especially when you have so much to memorize. So I'm going to go over 2 examples of make it sticks that I've used in my classes. And if you want help developing any, this is one of the most fun parts of my job, so just feel free to reach out. So one of the terms you need to know in world geography, IB history, is a dominion. Now, a dominion is a territory of another government. The one we typically study is that Canada is a dominion of Great Britain. How are you going to remember this term or what it means? Well, the way I tell my students to remember it is that a dominion basically means that you're the minions of another territory or government, that you are there to essentially serve this other leader. So a dominion, the minions. So this is a play on words example of making it stick. Another common way that people make it stick is through acronyms. So, for example, if you have to memorize a lot of terms and maybe the chronology matters, this is an example of how to do so. So these are the different battles in the Pacific from World War II. It includes Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. That's a lot to memorize. So now some people, that 5 to 10% of students I was talking about, are going to be able to remember that. Most of us, however, are not. So what I suggest doing is taking the first letter of each of those battles. So boom, I have those letters. Now, what I want to do is come up with a way that I can actually memorize it. And so what some people do is they come up with something totally silly and unrelated to remember it. Other times, what I try to do for my IB history classes is I come up with ones that actually build to what the topic is that we're trying to remember. So, for example, to remember the battles in the Pacific, the way I teach them to memorize it is, can MacArthur go to seas and land in order to win? Now, this is directly helpful in remembering the content that we're trying to memorize because MacArthur is the general that is in charge of the battles out in the Pacific, and he really is trying to go through the seas and eventually get to the mainland of Japan in order to win. So it is an easier way to memorize the battles, an easy way to remember the letters that build to the battles, and an easy way to kind of remember how it all builds together. So this is one strategy. I've definitely made silly make it sticks, including Taco Daydreams Make Wallets Wither with Knowing Taco Bell is Near, as a way to remember how to write an introduction paragraph. It has nothing to do with the tacos, but it is a weird way to remember. I've also done Coca-Cola challenges sipping Pepsi as a way to remember the bigger thematic concepts of IB history. So have fun with it. It's silly. And it's a way to make studying fun, but also a way to actually help you memorize. These are the type of things that I would brain dump as soon as I started tests when I was talking about that in video 2, because these are things that you want to remember. And so if you immediately write them down right away, you don't have to memorize them any longer, and you have them there to reference to in a visual. So that is how to study for tests you have to memorize for. Now, unfortunately, not all tests are like that. So this is why it's important to know the process, that step by step. This is going to be more likely for math and science type problems. You are going to have to memorize formulas, but eventually it's really coming down to the step by step. So my best advice for how to study for these types of questions are you want to get each problem that you've studied in class to a general process. This means that there are no specific numbers. You've gotten it down to variables. And if you can have a general step-by-step, maybe it's 5 steps, 7 steps, etc., kind of like a proof when you're working on geometry, you can then apply this general step-by-step to any problem you encounter on a test, making it easier, and you've provided yourself that map of directions. If you're an avid and you've done TRFs and tutorials, this is essentially what we're trying to get you to. So that way you don't just know this one problem, you know how to answer it for any problem that is similar with any numbers. Also, as monotonous as this next tip might sound, is you just have to practice over and over and over until it's committed to memory and you really understand those step-by-step processes. So this is something you can do for those problems that you really struggle with. I would suggest having fun with it, having a little whiteboard, practicing over and over again, because who doesn't love expo markers? You can also use mirrors with expo markers, but please make sure you're using an expo marker so you don't permanently mark up the mirrors at your house. But you can do this and then just easily erase it, and it's a little bit more fun. Last but not least, you need to know what's helpful to you when it comes to studying. Just because I'm giving these tips doesn't mean they're going to work for you. Just because a teacher or a friend or a classmate or an older sibling or a parent has given you tips doesn't mean they're going to work for you. You need to figure out your system. That requires trial and error to figure out where you're going to end up and how you're going to end up studying. And what's helpful to you might change for different classes, might be different, might change also throughout the years. So some typical things that you need to ask yourself is, do you work better late at night, or do you better when you wake up early? So some people, their brains start jamming around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and they can stay up late and then wake up and be totally fine. If you're more like me, my brain kind of shuts off around that time. And so it's just better for me to go to sleep because my productivity is not good that late at night anymore. And instead, I'll set my alarm for 4 o'clock, wake up, knock some stuff out, way, way more productive. Now, only do this if you know for sure that you'll wake up early. But you need to figure out what works best for you. Also, are you more of a handwritten or technology type person? Some of us are more old school. We like to write it out, being able to color code, draw, calligraphy, etc. Other people are much more technology based. They would rather create these things online. You need to figure out what works best for you. There are pros and cons to each. Maybe you want to do a combination. Last but not least, do you need to have this constantly in your face? Is this something that if I don't have presently in my face all the time, I'm going to forget about it? So some suggestions is you can put post-it notes around your house. This is especially helpful for world languages, for vocabulary. Or you can set your lock screen to something you're trying to remember, or a study guide, or a make it stick, or a one-pager. That way it is right there and it's a reminder to you. However, if that's something that would stress you out, don't do that. You have to know what's helpful to you. These are my tips on how to study for finals. If you have any questions, want to flush out any ideas, please email lagoonamazing@gmail.com. You can contact me on the Remind 101 or the Instagram if you already follow. Thank you. Good luck on finals.